Welcome to another episode of Tea with Tara, Conversations about Writing. Today on the show, we have Michele Riedel, and I do hope I'm saying her last name right. We'll check when she gets on the air. I haven't met her before, but Michele has been published in Streetlight Magazine, Third Wednesday, River City Poets Anthology, and other journals. She enjoys attending critiques, workshops, and open mic nights, and has found a supportive community with River City Poets in Richmond, Virginia. She began journaling at 10 and continued on and off for years. She draws inspiration from her family, nature, and life experiences. She's taught reading and ESL in elementary school and loves how reading poetry instills power and movement into her words. Her first chapbook, Tumbling Lessons, was released this past January 2022. So in just a few minutes, we'll be joined by Michele, and we're going to learn a little about her journey as a writer. Stay tuned. Hi, welcome back to Tea with Tara, Conversations about Writing. We are now joined by Michele Riedel. Michele, welcome.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to the interview.
I'm looking forward to talking to you, finding out about your journey as a writer. So when did you first discover that you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, when I was about 8, I always jotted my thoughts down in journals. I really didn't know that I wanted to be a writer that young, but I knew it would always be an important part of my life. I saved every journal I ever did write in. I saved them for years.
And were there any books that influenced you? Any authors that you looked up to?
Yeah, I guess you could say I had a lot of that teen angst, and I also had, I was kind of a loner sometimes. So I really enjoyed Carson McCullers' book, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, To Kill a Mockingbird, with Harper Lee, by Harper Lee. And, I just love the strong characters that and how they were growing up and just what they went through and how they fought the world on their own. And I also really just loved the classics in high school. I loved Jane Eyre, The Catcher in the Rye, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Those are all required, and I love them all.
Did you have any teachers that influenced you? Any English teachers at all?
Well, actually, it's funny that you'd say that, because when I was in high school, I went to a Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young concert, and the assignment was to just write like some type of literature or writing, poetry, whatever. And I ended up writing a kind of a synopsis of the concert. She said, "You know what you did? You were a journalist. You just gave us a nice example of the concert from this perfect news article." And instead of making me feel like, an outsider to the assignment, she encouraged my writing and said it was really good. So, you know how sensitive you can be and
Yeah.
Self-conscious when you're like in 9th grade. So that
Teachers
really
can make such an impact, right? In our lives.
Yeah.
I had an English teacher too who influenced me especially with the classics. That's how I learned about William Shakespeare and really started getting into all of that.
Yeah.
Did you have any people in your personal life who encouraged you to be a writer? Or for that matter, did you have anyone who said, a writer? Why would you want to be a writer?
Yes, my Uncle Don, he wrote, and he actually was a child psychiatrist in the county schools. And he wrote a book that helped children to, before this became like accepted, how to relax, to deep breathe, and to envision positive imagery. And even at the end of the book, there was a mirror that was like kind of a thing that he had stuck in the last part of the book, and to look at themselves and to re-image and to create a positive mindset. And I just thought, wow, this is so cool. And it's so beyond what schools were really ready for, So it gave me the ambition to, look, I'm in the back of my head, I think it just planted the seeds of innovation, just don't ever stop. Don't ever think there's something you can't do. Just,
right.
Keep on writing. And I always knew that eventually, I would always be writing one way or the other. And even there were times in my life where I was too busy with college or kids or with jobs at some point there was an way to self-express.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Also, I think, I don't know if this kind of helps, but art is there's so many different areas, and I made jewelry, like gold jewelry, and from scratch to finish, and I had a little jewelry shop, and I presented in shows and also in jury shows, and a little bit with photography. So even though I may not be writing, the creative wheels are turning, and I think
Right.
that's why I write with a lot of imagery.
And have you ever been given any advice on writing, on being a writer? What's the best piece
Oh,
of
yes.
advice?
Oh gosh, just don't give up. You know, there's so much self-doubt, because a lot of times, even though for me, I'm really out there and I networked, otherwise it would be hard. That really helps. But don't give up writing, no matter what. If you get rejected, rejection rate is extremely high with writers. The competition is thick, but you just keep on. Don't let that bother you. Just keep on submitting. I know the first couple were just it was so painful, and I just kept on. And the ones that I got into are the ones that I use in the acknowledgments in my chapbook down, Tumbling Lessons, and that helped me become published. So every piece is a building block to the next. You just don't stop. And also to insert a 10-minute writing slot into your day to try to establish discipline. Now, I do better if I'm a little bit under pressure, to be honest with you, but try not to let too much time pass.
Yeah. And rejection is actually, it can be a motivator. I mean, that will really test the will of a writer, because if you give up right away when you get rejected, then you don't really want to be a writer.
Right. Yes, exactly. And that's why it's so important to network, because we're always we all help support each other, bolster each other, sad together, feel our successes together. So networking is so important.
It is, because we really understand each other. We really understand everybody. As writers understand one another, as opposed to, I call them the outsiders, because there are people, when I said I want to be a writer, they kind of look at you like your dog might look at you, like, really? A writer?
Yeah, what'd you say, you were writing a poem? Yes.
For real? A real poem? So what is your writing process like?
Well, I try to work on it every day, a little bit. But writing, it's not just sitting at a desk and writing, it's life experiences. So I do my best writing when I'm walking, and I bring my phone with me, and I literally record dictate into my phone thoughts if I am inspired and if I see something. And when I'm driving, I might pull over and just, if a different part of my brain is going. So, it's a culmination of many things. It could be a dream, So you have to, the point is to, you just really need to get your stream of consciousness down on paper, those thoughts. And more, the more you exercise that, just like the muscle in your brain, that muscle, then the more immediate those thoughts come out on paper, I've found. And, you're not just staring at that blank page. So, the sooner you put those thoughts down, the crisper it is, and the more you can pick it up later, and then, oh, well, I can fit this together, and I get the second half and how I can make this work into a poem.
Yeah, that reminds me of one of my favorite writers, Willa Cather, which I have her shirt on right now, but she said about writing ideas, either use them or lose them, because if you don't jot it down, you're not going to get that moment back.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Tumbling Lessons is your first chapbook. Can you tell us a little about what a chapbook is for our viewers who might not know what a chapbook is?
It's a small publication up to about 40 poems. 40 pages, not poems, but up to about 40 pages. So usually about 25 to 32 poems, that kind of thing. And then if you get much more than that, then they use the word collection, that it's a poetry collection.
And how did you get the idea to do the chapbook?
just from, and actually I was the same way. What is a chapbook? Just being affiliated with so many different poets and organizations here, and then just reading their work. Richmond City poets here, River City poets, the James River writers. Those two groups, those were the first ones. They were immediate friends that brought their chapbooks, and read from their chapbooks. And it was just intriguing to me. And they're all about the same size, they're not, 8 by 5 generally. I did read something about it. In modern Europe, it was a type of printed street literature.
Oh, really? I'm not too familiar. I mean, I read poetry a little bit of Dylan Thomas, Emily Dickinson, but I'm not a poet myself. I find it difficult to write poetry. Do you think it's, obviously you don't find it difficult because you're a poet, but what do you say to people who or like me, who say, I can't do it. I just cannot write poetry?
Well, it's, I started out by just writing prose pretty much through my childhood, and, complete long sentences, and with a lot of work, more wordy. And poetry is definitely more disciplined, and you have to, you take out and you learn to distill and find out what is it that I really want here, what is really portraying that the feeling that I want the quickest. And then I think learning all the techniques that are involved really helps. You really have to just studying those techniques and trying to, like, if you write a poem, just maybe try a different way of writing it, adding spaces, maybe add more metaphor. I think all those things really help. Also just like reading other poets and find out what their styles are, and to just think, oh, how did they get that? How did that happen? How did they make the person or me feel a certain way? So, I think listening to poetry and reading, and not just cut yourself off from it, just keep on listening and writing. And, I think you just really need to try to keep an open mind towards it. And, and listen to there are so many out there, just like flavors of ice cream. There's some poets are very inviting, and they have, for example, they're lighthearted and humor filled, and they invite the reader in so easily, such as Billy Collins. He's
right.
one of the
Oh yeah, I read him in college.
Open-ended poets there are, and he's done so much.
Yeah,
for
really
folks that are like what you said.
Oh, why do you think people want to be writers? I was talking about this with somebody yesterday, and George Orwell once said it's all to do with the ego. Do you believe that, or what do you think we're trying to do as writers? Why is it such a necessity?
I just think there's an urge in all the arts, especially if I'm very left-brained, and I have that urge to create. And I think that it's my genre of choice, if you will, my outlet, my medium of expression is writing. And I mean, like I said, I've dabbled in jewelry, I've done photography, but this was just always so more immediate and satisfying for me.
And have you ever done any type, I think you said you did some prose, but have you ever thought about writing a novel?
I have, and I'd like to challenge myself to do that. I did take a class, and almost everyone there, they had already been writing like that. And I found it so difficult to kind of flip what I learned from the distillation into writing, compacting your feelings into poetry, to the broad idea of a novel, and to development of character. I love the development of character. Yeah. I think it would really enrich my poetry to stretch in those areas and challenge myself there.
And you've also done quite a bit of journaling. So what is it about journaling, do you think, that is so beneficial to the writer?
Most of my journaling, to be honest with you, was when I was younger. I think now that I do a lot more, using my computer and my phone just because it's there with me all the time. But I do think that when you're writing it down, it's so organic and you see it there on paper, and you can, you can put the spaces in more easily. You can draw a picture of your impression of what you're seeing. And, it's just, like I said, more organic, and you're using your hand to the page. So I think that it is, it would be my choice, but it's not always convenient for me to have a journal with me. But when I was younger, I had it right beside my bed and I'd write it every night. And I think the most important thing is that you find what is the vehicle that works best for you, and to get those thoughts out there.
Did you think when you were younger that the journaling was cathartic in any way?
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. It was therapeutic. I mean, when I'd write, yes, it definitely, I felt like it was like a friend or a person, to have those thoughts out there, and it helped me to understand them, move through them. And then also I could go back and read and see how I used to feel. That's why I kept every journal. I'd go back and see how far have I come from, 4 or 5 years ago, and my outlook in life and people. I mean, I had one in college, and, back in those days, we didn't have computers and everything. So journal, came in handy there. Just like old letters.
Yeah, I had a bunch of them when I was younger. I've started journaling again, but the ones from my youth I got rid of. So can't look back on those, but at least I have all of these journals.
Some of them are painful.
Yeah, they really are. Do you ever suffer from writer's block? Or do you, like some of my other writers on here, you don't believe in writer's block?
Oh, yes, I definitely do. I do. And, sometimes I think you have to just get out and walk around, do things, you have to go for walks. You need to, writing is life. It's life experiences. So sometimes I think that it's all there, and even though you don't know it subconsciously, you're forming poems all the time.
Right.
So you just because you're not literally writing it down now, it will come out later. So I think you shouldn't beat yourself up if that happens. And for me, it's nature, getting out, walking around. You have to find that button that helps to clear your head and to help you to become more forgiving, and know that, well, there are going to be days like that. And you have to move through it. It's cyclical, really.
So in your biography, I mentioned that you enjoy attending workshops and critiques. Can you talk a little about that?
Yes. The funny thing about the pandemic is it forced me to do everything online. So now, I've got friends in as far away as Zimbabwe, because I met this guy at a workshop at Bridgewater Community College, at a festival, actually. And that's how I know Don Lee's our mutual friend. And networking is really important. But with the pandemic, it forced me to go online. And well, eventually he wanted to, after tumbling lessons, he wanted to know more about my writing process and interviewed me. And it became published in a Zimbabwean journal called The 100 Sailors. So you never know, the power of the internet is wonderful. And the whole interview was online, but it's not only through the networking, but through the classes I've taken. I'm taking one in a writer house in Charlottesville online, and it's just been so wonderful. Just the corresponding with other writers, I've learned so much. And it's also the workshopping before the pandemic was all in person and with River City Poets. And I mean, I was a member of that for 8 years. So that gave me all the incentive and motivation, support through the networking, through the editing, and going through critiques, which can be painful sometimes.
Yeah.
So, you're really getting out there and networking as much as you can. And one hand helps the other. And that's what helped me in my final product of the chapbook.
Yeah, we hear so many negative things about the internet, which it can be negative, but we forget about the positive experiences, like the networking and meeting other writers. And I myself have also met a bunch of writers through networking.
Oh, yeah.
Where do you find your inspiration for your writing?
again, poetry is life experiences, but I'd say family, nature, just all the life experiences. Since I'm older, I've been through parenting, empty nesting, older adult relationship, with being married over 30 years. That poetry book I just, Tumbling Lessons, is, it starts when I was really young, and actually, and I'm also Catholic and Lebanese. So those are two other interesting areas that I was able to use to pull from. So it began with jumping out an airplane with a nun, and she taught me how to tumble. And yes,
that is something to write about.
Came on the plane with prayer beads, and I was worried that we were going to crash. And so, my thoughts just leaped on to private Catholic school and all the experiences, and then moved into very young into areas in Richmond and the Bryan Park in the 60s, a snapshot of Easter Sunday of my family growing up, poems about my family, my sister, our relationships through the years, my husband and I, and a little bit about the pandemic with yoga, Zoom yoga, and then just my beach house in Sandridge, and just the trips there. And then it's just life, and just all the ups and downs, relationships with my immediate family, and empty nesting, and my son. So all of those were very rich, fertile areas to just pull from, and many poems about all of them, and distilling them down over the last 8 years.
Right. And with all of the life experiences, I don't think any writer will ever be short on topics to write about, because they happen every day.
Exactly.
How do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as a writer? I mean, if someone says, what do? Do you automatically say, I'm a writer?
I think really, first, it depends on the stage of life, but I think I've always played my role. I'm a mom, I'm a wife. I think now that I'm more retired, I'm a tennis player, yoga teacher. So there are all of those things, or else I'd shrivel up. I think you have to continue to grow and explore, and I'm blessed with the support system, and all these years of saving and so forth, that now I can do that. So I didn't really have the luxury of finding all this time to workshop poems and write and so forth. So at this time of my life, it's been perfect for that.
Do you think being a writer means that you have to be published, or are you a writer if you just love to write?
No, I think it's kind of the cherry on top, that when you do get published, it does take a lot of trial and error to and work to find that your way into different journals. One of the things that I suggest too is when after you've gone through the editing with a core group that you trust, it's really important to know that it's okay if you're rejected. That doesn't really reflect on you as a poet. So you need to remember that poetry is subjective. Its beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. People really draw from what their life experiences are and how they relate to that. And that's where the subjectivity comes in. So the same with the publisher. Now there are tiers. There's the hardest area, the most difficult markets to publish in. Then there's the medium and the lesser competitive. So you could start with the highest and move your way down. So that's another way. Another way is theme poetry. Look for themes that are submission calls. So those are the ways I think that help me the most. And then maybe I'd get a breakthrough and then, oh, wow, my poem has been published. This is great. So, then once you get that first one, it propels you to, hey, you know what, this can happen, not bad. So I think
are there any techniques that poets use? For those of us who know nothing about poetry, any?
Absolutely. My favorite is metaphor. Because of my background with writing so much, with drawing and jewelry design and photography. Have very rich images in my work. So I've had to kind of not be too heavy on it and learn to layer my poetry with simile, consonants. Consonants is the beginning, the blend of consonants at the beginning of words. Alliteration, starting with the same sound. Repetition, you might see a thought or a word repeated in somewhere, either in the same line or in the same poem. Hyperbole, exaggeration. So all of these things, you know, sometimes you catch yourself doing it and you didn't even know that was the technical term for it. So, you know, it's something that I think you find that you develop with your style when you adopt a certain style of writing.
And are there any famous poets that you'd like to meet, if you could, living or dead?
You know, I guess really I still go back to Billy Collins. I'd love to meet Billy Collins. He's just so he's personable, and he has that humor, and you know, he writes with sensitivity about life, and it flows right into that. It flows right into just could be difficult things to write about. And you know, there's so much talent. He has so much talent to be able to bring the writer to that level that invites him into the work. So I think I'd love to meet him, yes, and to just talk about his technique.
Are you a fan of Emily Dickinson at all?
You know, yes, I am. I think so.
Yeah, she's someone I would like to meet. I've been to her house. She had quite a fascinating life. I think I'm more interested in her life though than her poetry. Like, why was she in her room all day?
Yeah. And another one would be Thoreau and his trip to the woods and Walden Pond and so forth, to get an idea of their setting and their basic inspiration.
So how does poetry affect people emotionally?
You know, I just think that a lot of that is what you bring to it. You know, it's subjective, and your experiences and how it connects to what you read, and the way you can lose yourself in a poem and become immersed in it. You know, a good reader, you have to learn to be a good reader for a poem, in a poem. And you might read it the first time, but then you might put it away and then come back and read it again later, and then maybe later on, and just let it settle with you. A lot of work has been done in this poem, and you know, it's not going to present itself immediately to you and make that impression. But I think you know, it's a lot of it is how you connect, and a lot of that is your past experiences and how, you know, that subjectivity comes into play.
Right. And we touched on this a little bit before, but what do you say to people who find poetry difficult to understand? Not difficult to write, but to read. Is it just keep reading it and take it one sentence at a time, or?
You know, just don't expect literal meaning. People really want everything literal in this day and age. You know, challenge yourself to look below the surface for meaning. Appreciate the craft. You know, like what did they do to, you know, understand what they did, you know, look below the surface for meaning, and find the metaphor, enjoy the sound that you hear. And a lot of that too is, you know, if I'll read a poem, but when I hear the actual poet read the poem in an open mic, it just changes it. It brings it all into a different dimension. And yes, so there are different ways to experience the poetry too.
Are you working on anything currently? Any new projects in the works?
Yes, I'm actually trying to, you know, like I said, I just finished my first chapbook, Tumbling Lessons, but my challenge is to write more of a themed book, so that it's not just about like I'm hopping from this part of my life to another. Perhaps about the garden. I was really very much influenced by Louise Gluck, who won the Pulitzer Prize for poetry. in 2020, and her chapbook titled The Wild Iris. So, and there's a lot of reincarnation through and personification through the flowers and coming back to life. And it was just beautiful with just lovely verses and a little bit of biblical insight too. And I thought maybe to write a themed book, like half of it is about night flowers blooming in the night, and the other half maybe daytime flowers blooming, and just from the perspective of the flower using personification.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little more like
Do
would be a challenge.
do your children show any interest? Any future writers?
I have one son, and he is very creative, and yeah, I think he's really more interested in he will tell me honestly if he likes a poem or not, and I love that. I love that he's honest and shoots from the hip. But he has a lot of creativity, and it shows in a lot of ways. And I don't, he hasn't really said that he wants to write, but I think he could. I think he really could do that if he wanted to.
Try to convince him. We need all the writers.
Yeah, I think
Do
that he could if he wanted to. I think he's more creative even than he gives himself credit for.
you have any last minute advice for aspiring poets?
Just really to read as much as you can of poetry. If you're not writing, then read it. And I get one of those daily mail things that come in my email of different poetry websites that I really love. And just to develop your style by reading and listening, find someone that you might be able to relate to. But again, don't be discouraged, to get out there and network. You'll find it takes the village in writing as well. And just enjoy it, enjoy the craft, go to workshops, do 10 festivals if you can, get out there and meet other people, explore their genres, and try to keep an open mind.
Well, Michele, it's been wonderful to talk to you. And I wish you the best of luck on your first chapbook, and congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you so much. It's been a real journey. I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to doing the book launch eventually. And I really appreciate your interviewing me. And
it was my
really
pleasure.
hearing your process as well.
I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
So that concludes another episode of Tea with Tara, Conversations About Writing. I want to thank my special guest, Michele Riedel. It was wonderful to meet her and to hear about her journey as a writer. And, I wanted to tell you a little bit about my intent on why I started Tea with Tara to begin with. I want to give a platform to writers, because I don't think that you have to be famous to be heard. We all have a story to tell. We all share a love of creation, creativity, and writing. And I think we deserve a platform to be able to talk about our journey as a writer. You shouldn't have to have your name, you shouldn't have to win the Pulitzer Prize to be a writer or to be heard as a writer. So I enjoy these conversations, and it's really wonderful to hear everybody's journey. And I know a lot of my questions are repetitious. A lot of the questions I ask each of my guests is a little repetitious, but they all bring new answers to the table. So I hope you are enjoying this, and thank you to my subscribers and to my watchers, my viewers, and I hope to see you next time. Keep writing.